When I was a kid, my parents used to let me stay up late on weekends. Halloween that year happened to fall on a Saturday, so I got to stay up later than usual, sitting alone in the living room watching TV. It was pretty late. I was half asleep in front of the screen when I heard something outside on the front porch. It sounded like the old porch swing creaking back and forth. It could have easily been the wind, but I was a nervous kid, and curiosity got the better of me. I got up quietly and tiptoed over to the window that faced the porch. What I saw made my stomach drop. There was an older woman sitting on our porch swing. She looked to be in her 50s. She was wearing only a thin nightgown, and her skin was smeared with what looked like blood. In her hand, she was holding a large kitchen knife. For a second, I thought I must have been imagining it, but it looked too real. I was only 7, and I immediately bolted toward my parents' room, crying and yelling that there was a scary woman outside. My dad woke up first and tried to calm me down, asking what I had seen. Between hiccups and tears, I told him there was a woman on the porch holding a knife. At first, he looked confused, then a bit irritated. He clearly thought I was just dreaming or making it up. He told me I had probably had a nightmare and said I could stay in their room if I was scared. But I wouldn't drop it. I kept insisting he check, and finally he sighed, got out of bed, and followed me toward the front door. He unlocked it and opened it up, ready to prove to me that nothing was there, even though I'd begged him not to go outside. He started to say, "See, there's nothing out," but stopped mid-sentence. The woman was still there, sitting on the swing. I'll never forget the way his face changed when he saw her. She slowly turned her head toward us, her eyes wide and wild. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then my dad slammed the door shut and locked it again. He told my mom, who was now awake, to call the police and ran to grab his gun. A moment later, he came back, cracked the door open just enough to stick the barrel of the gun out, and told the woman to get off the porch. She didn't move. She just stared. After a long moment, she finally spoke. Her voice was shaky as she said, "Somebody killed my husband, but it wasn't me." My dad froze, unsure how to respond. He told her the police were coming and that they could help her once they got there. She glanced down the street, her expression shifting to panic, then turned suddenly and ran off into the darkness. My dad shut and locked the door again, yelling for my mom to stay on the phone. He stood by the door, gun in hand, staring toward the porch, until the police arrived about 15 minutes later. They searched around the neighborhood and eventually found her trying to break into one of our neighbors' houses. Later, we heard that she had some kind of mental breakdown and hadn't been taking her medication, apparently. She had gotten into a fight with her husband earlier that night and attacked him, though he wasn't badly hurt, after he forced her out of the house. She cut herself, either trying to harm herself or make it seem like he had done it. We never heard directly from the police after that, only bits of the story through neighbors, but that Halloween stuck with me. It was easily the most terrifying night of my life. After that, I never slept in the living room again. For years, I couldn't even relax. There at night, without thinking about that woman sitting on our swing, the faint sound of it creaking still makes me uneasy to this day. It was Halloween night in 2016 when this happened. I had to work pretty late that day, and by the time I finally left, it was close to 10 p.m. I lived alone in a small house not too far from work. Since I knew I wouldn't be home in time for trick-or-treaters, I had left a bowl of candy on the front step before leaving that morning. That was about all I did for Halloween. That year, we had a few decorations up at work, but I had been too busy to think about celebrating. The drive home took around 15 minutes. The streets were quiet, which wasn't unusual for that time of night. About a mile away from my house, though, something strange caught my eye. On the side of the road, standing partly in the ditch, was a man dressed in a clown costume. It was a narrow, empty road lined with trees on both sides, so seeing anyone there, especially someone in costume, felt ODD. As I passed, the clown lifted his hand and waved at me. I figured it was just someone trying to spook drivers for Halloween, so I waved back and kept going. A couple of minutes later, I reached my neighborhood. My street was pretty normal, a bunch of houses close together, but by then, trick-or-treating was long over, and everything was silent. As I pulled closer to my driveway, I noticed something that made me stop. There was another clown, fully dressed up with a mask and holding a balloon, standing right in front of my garage. Even though it was Halloween, the sight made me uneasy. I slowed to a stop at the end of my driveway, just watching him. The clown stared directly at me but didn't move or wave. I waited for him to leave, but he just stood there completely still. I rolled my window down a little and called out, asking what he was doing. He didn't respond, didn't even react. I told him he needed to move so I could park my car, but he stayed where he was. After sitting there for nearly a minute with the engine running, I decided to just park at the far end of the driveway and head inside. I figured he would walk off once I went in. I turned the car off, got out, and started walking toward my front yard. The clown still hadn't moved. Then as soon as I took a few steps, he started walking toward me. Not directly, but at an angle that would put him between me and my front door. That stopped me immediately. When I froze, he did too. I realized if I tried to go for the door, I'd have to unlock it, and if he came after me, I wouldn't make it inside fast enough. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. From behind my house, 3 more clowns came sprinting out, all in full costume, and they were running straight toward me. I didn't think twice. I turned and bolted back to my car. I jumped in, slammed, the doors locked, and fumbled with the keys to start the engine. All 4 of them reached my car just as I got it started. One of them yanked on the driver's side handle, and another tried the passenger's side. Thankfully, I managed to throw it in reverse and back out of the driveway before they could open anything. They didn't chase me into the street, they just stood there at the end of the driveway, all 4 of them lined up waving at me as I drove away. It was one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. I kept driving around nearby streets for about 10 minutes trying to calm down. Eventually, I decided to head back home. I told myself that if they were still there, I'd call the police. When I got back, the driveway was EMPTY. No one was around. I got out cautiously and checked around the front and back of the house. Everything looked clear. But when I got to my front door, I noticed something that made my skin raw all over again. The ball loon the first clown had been holding was now tied to my door handle. That was the final touch that completely unnerved me. I went inside, locked up, and spent the rest of the night, half expecting to hear them come back. They never did. But to this day, that is still the scariest Halloween night I've ever had. One Halloween night when I was 15, my friends and I decided to go trick-or-treating. We knew we were a bit old for it, but we thought it would be fun to do it one last time together. We started off in our own neighborhood, but the houses weren't giving out much candy. Someone suggested heading over to the nicer part of town, the one known for handing out full-sized candy bars. The fastest way there was a shortcut that went through a small wooded area. We had used that trail plenty of times before when visiting friends who lived on the other side, so it wasn't unfamiliar. Still, I had only ever walked through it during the day, and the idea of crossing it at night made me uneasy. The rest of the group, though, didn't want to waste time taking the long route, so I went along with it. Once we entered the woods, the glow and noise of the neighborhood faded behind us, until all we could hear was the crunching of leaves under our feet and our own voices talking. At one point, while everyone else was chatting, I thought I heard something behind us, a faint rustling like footsteps on dry leaves. I told myself it was probably just an animal, but I turned around and aimed my flashlight back down the path anyway. I didn't see anything, but my sudden movement caught everyone's attention. The group stopped walking and turned to look. I told them I thought I heard someone or something moving behind us, but that there was nothing there when I checked. We all agreed it was likely just a small animal and kept walking, though this time everyone was much quieter, speaking only in low whispers. A minute or two later, we heard it again. This time the sound was louder and everyone heard it. We all spun around at once and froze. Just off the path, maybe a short distance away, were 2 men standing among the trees. They were both dressed completely in black and not moving. That was all it took for us to take off running. Nobody said a word, we just bolted down the path, trying to get out of the woods as fast as we could. Behind us, we could hear branches snapping and leaves crunching like they were running after us. It sounded like they were getting closer, but we didn't dare look back. We finally burst out of the woods and back into the neighborhood streets, breathing hard and looking around. Streetlights and houses never looked so good. We waited there for a while, watching to see if the men would come out of the trees, but they never did. Maybe it was just 2 random guys messing around and trying to scare us. But at 15, being alone in the woods with strangers following us didn't feel like a prank, it felt genuinely dangerous.